You want answers.
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
All right. Welcome to Truth Radio. It has been a while, and it's good to be back. It almost feels like a first show, even though we got some green screen there in the back. But pay not attention to the man behind the curtain. We've got a man in front of us we're going to talk to today. He's running for California governor. If you've watched me for a while, you've seen him quite a few times. And he's been gaining a lot of ground, and yet still too many people haven't heard of him. Hopefully that'll change. At least a few more people will have heard of him after today because, you know, if you take Scripture seriously, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. And he has been doing that. He wrote a book called Lucifer Zenith that really took us through his journey through the political process when he felt called to step up when there was a congressional seat open in the 25th district back in 2020, just before that when I met him. But he's a United States Naval veteran, a Black Knight, former HS-4 Black Knight. Truly is the epitome of someone who served and was willing to die for this country, and he's willing to stand on truth despite numerous death threats, threats to his family, to his well-being. He's taken a hit financially in his work. So this whole journey hasn't come without a cost, yet he's still here standing firm. I'm always super impressed every time I talk to him. He's got a whole entourage here now, so clearly a lot more people have heard of him. I'm still waiting to see the billboard that's up on the 101. But I'm talking about Daniel Mercuri. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on now because that is what we're here for as we come up on this election very soon. And Daniel Mercuri, DanielForCalGovernor.com. How are you, brother?
I'm doing good. Jeremy, and again, thank you, brother. I always love being around you. Being a Christ believer, always, making sure that you surround yourself with fellow believers, right, to maintain, an uplifting spirit. And I loved how you and I hit it off back, when you were, I think I needed a cameraman back then. I was looking for somebody to videography and catch some of the the questions that I was going around to really try to figure out what was going on the streets, boots on the ground. I didn't want to just take the information from, the internet and some other journalists. I wanted to know personally what was going on, but, finding out you were a believer yourself, it's helpful, and I believe in prayer. You wanted to pray over me. You'd have told me a little bit about how you had helped out the homeless yourself. And for me, that was always, that was something that stuck with me. And I think you and I just became really good friends since then, all these years and stuff, and here we are today. And you've seen the journey, you've been there, brought me on a few times, and this has always been my state. But you're right, everything that's gone on has not been without a cost. There's been a cost to it, of course, and I don't regret any of it. I've met, some amazing people up north. I've met, amazing people down south. I've met some just, really creative minds, people who are just filled with ingenuity and entrepreneurial mindsets. I mean, really great Californians. So I don't regret any of it. And I'm looking forward to continuing this journey on to the very last day.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. And I think everybody that has learned about you feels the same way. There's a heavy heart of appreciation for someone who's willing to go against the grain and speak for truth and speak for the person who really isn't represented, even though there's a lot of lip service that says otherwise. I got a good quote from Daniel here. I got a lot of scripture we're going to go through. We might go through things we've already went through, but stick around. You're listening to Truth Radio on crntalk.com. We're here with Daniel Mercuri. His website is Daniel4, spell it out, Cal Governor, Daniel4CalGovernor.com. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com. Man, I tell you, when we met, I didn't have to wear these reading glasses. I remember that fully. You walked in here, you had the readers on. I was like, cool, we're both going to have readers on. I just can't. I gotta put them on, so I can't be squinting to try to look what I'm reading here. And if I fall back on these notes, I want to make sure I'm reading it properly. But let's go ahead, for people that may be meeting you for the first time, take you back to your roots. You grew up here in California, so you have an allegiance to the state. That's why you're trying to save it. Maybe later we'll change the backdrop. You provided a nice one with it in flames. Just tell me about your background, your parents. Like, we'll keep this quick, but so people understand where you're coming from and why you feel such a dedication and devotion to.
Yeah. I mean, I was born here. This is where I was raised. I have two parents that on one side, I'm half Mexicano and the other half is Sicilian. So I'm a half breed. On my father's side, they came here during World War II. There was, I believe, 3 boats, trying to evade a German U-boat that came here from Sicily. My great-grandmother Jerry came here, and they ended up, I think, in New York. And then, of course, she, carried on with her life growing up in Michigan. And then my grandfather, they moved out here to California. He was a carpenter and owned his own, grocery market. And my father eventually became an architect himself. My mother, on my mother's side, they came here from Mexico City and Tijuana. And, he was, he was just pretty much just he worked janitorial services. And my grandmother was a homemaker. And my mother actually came from a family of 11. So, and she was one of the youngest, and of course, they met. But I have 3 siblings, so I'm the youngest of 4. And California is my home. It's always been my home. But growing up, we grew up in poverty. I grew up very poor. We moved around quite a bit, more so around SoCal, predominantly Orange County. But I'm always thankful for my siblings. During the times that we had, with unfortunately, both my parents, growing up, were both alcoholic parents, and so there was a lot of misgivings and stuff. So, but by the grace of God, there were some good things that came about. My father was a theologian, so he really tried to install at least us knowing the Bible, even though he was a lot of do as I say, not as I do. And my mother, she was a very hard worker, and my siblings were all athletes. So for me, it gave me some avenues to push through the hardships of life when I was young.
Let's because you've got a very diverse background. I want to jump forward, maybe do a little like cliffhanger like we should have done in the beginning. Let's get to some of the stuff that really opened your eyes, because you grew up like everybody else, and you did go to the military, veteran, and honorably discharged. You got into TV after, right?
Yeah.
You still are, right? And the skills come in well. They suit you well. But let's get right into when your eyes opened in a way they hadn't been before. I know you had an interesting story on 9/11 when you were there at the White House, the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And then if you read Lucifer Zenith, it's a page turner. You're like, is this real? Like, how does he know this? Like, what? Like, wow, you can do that. You can find this out if you're willing to do the research. Nobody is.
Yeah.
But what was the first spark that led you down that path that most people would consider to be probably a conspiracy theorist, but when your eyes were open to, all right, things aren't what I grew up thinking they were?
Yeah. I think there was small little chapters in my life that started to build, that created that steering going in a direction that, people would say, well, you sound like a conspiracy theorist. But there were those little chapters, little notches in my life. And I think that one of the first ones was when I was in the military. I was ordered to go and reestablish the HS4 Black Knight Beret. And I was about to, send to the shredder and the burner, this box that said, shred. So everybody stands watch at night. And I looked at the box and it said history of the Black Knights. And in there was all these documentations and old photos of, the Black Knights wearing the beret. So they're the only command in the Navy to wear the black beret. And a lot of guys who are getting out now have never heard of that because, HS4 was decommissioned and recommissioned as HCS4, which is Helicopter Combat Squadron for Black Knights. And then I think they got decommissioned again. But the point is that I was sent to D.C. and And through that all, summary, yes, I was a witness to what happened to the Pentagon. So I actually saw what happened. And I don't talk about it a lot, and we're not going to get into that, but that opened my eyes up because I was told that I didn't see what I saw, and we were ordered to stand down. Even though I was a part of a search and rescue team, we were being ordered by the White House not to commandeer the helicopter that we knew we could commandeer to perform medevacs. And right then and there, I knew something was wrong. That was not a completely evaded Navy policy, and we were not being permitted to perform the jobs that we were trained to do, whether it was domestic or foreign, whether we were in foreign land or domestically, we had a responsibility. Why were we being denied this? And so that really opened my eyes up to the lies, because what I was seeing on television was not what was actually happening with what I was enduring when I was in D.C. And so from that moment on, I'd always had a pretty good, healthy skepticism of government, which was part of the reason why I got out. And you know, some of the missions we had. From that chapter, you know, little things started adding up. And when I was working at a job, I don't know if a lot of people remember, I think it was in 2010, there was the LAX shooting, the mass shooting. And I actually have this video up on my YouTube channel, U.S. and Navy Veteran. And on that platform, I put together a video that shows you the inconsistencies of the media, where they interviewed 7 channels, interviewed one guy, and he told a very same story. But the problem was out of all the witnesses that were there, it was only one person. Then I did my background and research on that individual, and he turned out to be one of those crisis actors. And I didn't understand what a crisis actor was. So that led me further down the rabbit hole of looking closely as a production, working in post-production, as to what was real, what was staged, because it's obvious as an editor, you can see what's superimposed, what looks real, what's over. None of it added up, and I realized this is all a stage. It's theater. And this started leading me down the rabbit hole as to even more conspiracies, but looking into, are they real or are they true? And that's the part that really kind of got to me and really kind of opened my eyes up to some of the uncertainties that we probably don't want to admit to. And deep down, we just don't want to believe that the people that we've elected in office, unfortunately, you know, have sold themselves out, you know, for the almighty dollar. And so for me, that was another notch. And every year, something would come up. And I started looking into, our presidents. So as I went down the line, I would say it was the Holy Spirit that kind of led me down this path, and I started looking into government, looking into our presidents, looking into legislation, and seeing all the inconsistencies. So it was a progression that led me down to where we're at today.
Like it is, I often talk about when I start talking about some of the bigger, deceptions, delusions going on, they when your eyes are open to it, you remember things you heard and things people told you along the way over your life, and all of a sudden they're little pieces of the puzzle that fit all of a sudden when they didn't before. Yeah. And there is that spiritual deception that's going on above it all. What was I going to ask? And we went out. Like reading Lucifer Zenith, it really is like a mind. Like I voiced it, right? And I'm sitting there reading it. And I would have to take a break sometimes just to digest it, because it's like, it's so much. And I feel like I already am aware of a lot of the things, but you just dug so deep. I think that would be a tough but mesmerizing read for people, but I also think a necessary one. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe you want to go through some of your biggest, I don't know, like awakening moments that you revealed in that book. And then I was going to ask you, is there a part 2? Like, what have you learned since then that maybe even takes it a step further in what you didn't even know when you were writing that?
Well, when I was putting it together, when I started running for office, inadvertently, I started seeing how a lot of the corruption globally and locally was all intertwined. It was very connected, and how we were being played by our own government and representatives and quote unquote the elites the people who are controlling everything behind closed doors, that are drafting the egregious legislation that really kind of enslave the people. And I realized a lot of this is tied to the Bible. And I didn't, just come to that conclusion overnight. I started researching. I was looking at Bible verses. I was looking at the book of Daniel, Isaiah, Matthew, and then of course I was looking into Revelation. And Revelation really was sort of my father and I's sort of pastime. Right, everybody likes baseball or football. My dad and I would actually play chess and talk about prophecy in the book of Revelation. And I had always had these, outlandish theories and ideas. But my dad was a theologian, as I said before. But he really broke down some of the four horsemen, and those were always my favorite to sort of study at the time, because they're sort of the beginning of troubled times and tribulation. And I started realizing that those horses were, for me, in my definition that I've discovered, was areas of industry. And the areas of industry started to come together as why the colors were what they were, and how it correlated to the events that we were being surrounded by, which is why I started. It really did. Some of this came to me in a dream. Some of it came to me through the research. Some of it, like when I was researching, I looked for it once before, but I didn't find anything. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, there was all this information. And it just like channels started opening up. And I always say that's, I give credit to God for that. Maybe it was just a certain word that I plugged in that just opened up a floodgates of information. And when I did that, I realized, I think we're on the precipice of tribulation. That's not being hyperbolic. It's just saying when you do the research, the numbers don't lie. The information starts to add up. Eventually, it's no longer a coincidence, because the root word of coincidence is to coincide.
Yeah, there definitely isn't any coincidences. You start to realize that as you do go down the rabbit holes. I've got a picture of Lucifer Zenith. We're going to pull that up next segment, because we're having some tech issues on the video side. But as far as what we're talking about, because I want to get to your opponents too. I feel like maybe we'll save that for the second hour. Maybe
Sure.
we get in to break down the actual election.
Yeah.
What has been the most difficult part of this most recent run up to this election? Because you've had death threats, your family, you've literally lost a job when they found out. Because all these things going on. What's been the most difficult? For
me, I think the most. Let me think about that. It's okay. We got a little bit of a tech issue going on here. I think. I don't know. I'm going to
read one of your own quotes. The time is coming when all Americans will have to pick a side and fight to maintain their freedoms, or be ruled by a tyrannical government. And we live, the Bible talks about the sheep being led like lamb to the slaughter, and that's truly what we are. And it's because we're ignorant, and it's a lack of knowledge that why people perish. And you've seen it up front. You'll tell people what's going on, and yet they'll still want to support, their favorite, their candidate that is getting supported and well-funded and is being seen on TV. They'll hear you say something and be like, can't you tell my candidate that? That's one of the most wild things that I've heard you talk about, that people actually have that audacity. They find a candidate in front of them.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that and it's a big struggle, because, the fight is in the state of California is that we want to win, right? But the win is sort of the umbrella phrase that those of us who are tired of all the lies, the gaslighting, a lot of people in California have finally picked up on the fact that it is a deliberate, gaslight, is deliberate swindling going on. Our taxes are being laundered. They're passing egregious legislation. We know it's unlawful. We know it's illegal, but they're doing it anyway. And we just have to win. And there's this gigantic compromise. And it's a compromise that I think a lot of people don't realize. That's exactly where the corrupting government, want you to be. They want you to be at an overwhelming level of compromising so that they can maintain their status quo.
Right. And if anybody is taking even 1% due diligence to look up the Epstein files, to see what's been released, see what's been really proven to be true in the emails and all of the back and forth, they really can't deny it anymore. But I think ignorance is bliss, and those cliches are true for a reason. All right, guys, stick around. We're going to get things working in order here. I think we're going to cool off this studio because it's getting hot. And we're talking to Daniel Mercuri. You're listening to Truth Radio on crntalk.com. Stick around. We got a lot more to get into. All right. Welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com. We're here with Daniel Mercuri, and I think we got things on the up and up here. Welcome back, brother. It should be cooling off here. We were getting into the toughest things, and I know it's so tough to pinpoint. I really should have the, this is a short segment. I'm going to go to the picture. And, I know you spent a lot of time even on just this design.
Yeah.
And I think let me make sure we got audio here when I'm transitioning over, because that is Lucifer Zenith. That is the book, Corrupting Nature's God Through Government Deception. It's like such a beautiful blend of keeping things biblical, looking at things through a God's perspective, which is what I try to do every day when I'm on the air. And you're doing it to expose the corruption. I like that. Is that the same graphic we use for the backdrop? We'll have to switch it up.
A little bit.
But what are your thoughts when you see that? You just talked about the four horsemen. This is the cover.
Yeah.
What memories does this bring back? What do you think you need to add to it?
I don't think there was anything to add to it, in the sense of the memory that comes to my mind is me sitting next to my daughter writing the book. My daughter was undergoing chemotherapy. She was diagnosed almost 3 years ago. And for me, I was in the off season after the 2022 campaigning and really trying to get my name out there. And, it was a heavy burden when I was doing the research and I was, sitting in the hallway. I had my laptop with me. My son, he was homeschooled, so he would bring his laptop or his books. And we all couldn't be in the same room. And some chemo that kids have to take is very toxic. In fact, they don't want people in the room. They literally put on like a full mask shield and rubber thick gloves with thin gloves underneath and a full gown. It's like a double gown. And this is the kind of poison that is being injected into my daughter. And subconsciously, it was hard to focus. But I knew that I needed to turn my attention over to, so that I wouldn't become overwhelmed with the emotions of my daughter, and watching her deteriorate from my eyes. But for me, it was like, you see the building on fire. It was burning in me that I needed to get this information out, because I can see our state burning up, and I can see these horsemen galloping. I can see the trials and the troubles coming our way. And this is why I've told people we don't have a lot. We don't have much more time. I think if we don't get this election right, and if we don't really start, rising up and waking up and really, pushing back, for what is, I know a lot of people hate to hear this, but what is godly? When we talk about the Bible, we talk about the Old Testament and New Testament. The New Testament was the new covenant, right? Mm-hmm. And those who believe in Jesus, upon Jesus, right, are God's chosen people. And when we talk about our covenant of this nation, it's the Declaration of Independence. And our forefathers were genius about it, which is why this nation had been so blessed. Whether you want to consider them to be deists at best is irrelevant to the fact that they knew that freedom was God's plan, always has been. And slavery is Satan's plan. And it's something that you can kind of see what's going on with all the stress and the strain. So I wrote that book to kind of nutshell all my information to get people started. Not everyone agrees with it, and that's okay. It wasn't designed to overwhelm you and try to get you to believe everything I said, but it's designed to try to show you where inconsistencies are at. Whether you believe in the Bible or not, I show you a lot of other issues that are going on. Even if you removed the horsemen, you knew that certain areas of industry are negatively affecting the people from prosperity. And that was really the point. And I've been accused of, of being a charlatan or utilizing the campaign to try to sell books. But even my campaign, team will tell you, they get upset with me when I bring like 20, 30, 50 books and I give them all out for free.
Right.
That's on my dime, or I mail them out and on my dime. It's
Right.
because it's about the information. It wasn't about the money.
Well, yeah, and that's clearly, again, it's from ignorance, because people don't realize you've been offered money multiple times. You've been threatened to bow out. You've been like enticed to bow out. You've been enticed to join one of your opponent's campaigns.
Yes.
All these things that would have been the easy road, and a lot of people without the moral backbone would have taken and been like, hey, that's a win.
Yeah.
But you truly care about the people, so you're sticking in it. So
Yeah.
we still got a lot more to talk about. Like I said, it's a short segment. You're listening to Truth Radio with Daniel Mercuri on crntalk.com. Stick around. We will be right back. All right. Welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com. We're here with Daniel Mercuri. Daniel for Cal Governor. It's just weeks away. It's hard to believe it's another election already. And it's hard to believe it's been, 7 years you've been on this journey.
Yeah.
And you've been through the ringer, man. You know firsthand what so many of us read about, we hear about. We see people being minimized, being demonized, being ostracized, being canceled for taking stances that you're taking and taking rather strongly. I mean, you've been called a racist, a white supremacist, an anti-Semite. Anybody who stands on the word of God will usually be called those things, a bigot, a homophobe, everything. What's been your worst moment? Maybe give like an example of your worst moment, like, and how maybe it turned it for your better. Obviously we gotta have grace and patience with people who don't show it in return. That's tough though.
Yeah.
But
I think I've had maybe, I can think of 2 or 3 off the top of my head. I think during the recall, one of my worst moments was when I was on, I vaguely remember the name. I think it was Hoodstocks. And I believe the podcaster's name was Lucky. And that was definitely a one-sided conversation. He had a great outline of questions. I could tell he had gone on my website and at least looked at some of my policies. So he really didn't have much against my policies. So he was trying to dig in for other things. And he had an audience, in the Latino community that was really one-sided, trying to paint me out to be a racist, and it wasn't really working for him, But some of the callers that were coming on, started getting pretty foul and aggressive. And I had already been shotgunned before, on a previous other interviews and stuff, where it was like an "I got you" moment and stuff. So I started getting used to that. So I remember I had asked the podcaster, I think his name was Lucky, and I said, listen, to keep the conversation moving on, there's going to be people I know are going to want to throw, hot tomatoes, raw tomatoes, whatever. They're going to say vulgarities. We got to keep the conversation going on. If somebody gets like that, let them say their piece and then turn it off and move to the next, person who has a legitimate question. There's no discourse. And he kind of got up and he walked up and he went in the back and he started laughing because one of the people really just started getting like, horrendous and just started engaging in vulgarities. And I just dropped down and I lowered myself to that level and I engaged in vulgarities right back. Now it kind of squelched everything, but I had wished it didn't get to that level.
yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, some people, you can't talk to them any other way but that way.
Yeah.
And it happens. It's, I'm human. I'm not perfect. And some people are out there just to try to get a rise out of you. And every once in a while, it's going to happen. And it didn't really work in their favor, but nevertheless, it happened. So, yeah, that's probably one of my lower moments in all of these years that I still remember to this day. I don't know if the video's still out there. I'm sure it is. But it's fine, and that's just how you just got to kind of roll with it. Running for office, especially at the governor level, is not for the faint of heart. It really not. It's one of the things you're going to have to show thick skin. You're going to have to study and show yourself approved. And that's been one of my rising moments is when I was reading the Bible. God really does say, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, as he reads in Hosea. But I realized that, that verse goes further on. But in knowing that, connecting to other verses, you need to have an education and you need to study and you need to be on top of your game. And there really isn't a subject matter now that I can't talk about because I've been doing this for 7 years. I have some information and some knowledge on how the government's supposed to function and why it's not, and how easy it is to set things right. It's very simple plans, that are lawful, not necessarily legal, because those two are not the same word. Legal and lawful are not the same. They're not synonymous. Yeah.
But the perception is all that matters, and people perceive them to be the same. So people are easily deceived.
Being called racist. Yeah, I've been racist. I've been white supremacist. White supremacist from the Latino community, even though I'm Latino. And I get called a lot of times like, oh, I'm a dark white boy, even though I'm like, no, I'm Latino. My mother's last name is Medrano. They came here from, like I said, from Mexico and Tijuana. My father's Sicilian, so I'm a half breed. But I'm people are like, oh, well, you're racist from the Latino community, or white supremacist. I don't know where that came from. I think it was because of my interactions with the Proud Boys. A lot of people are like, you should go talk to them. I did. I went and had a beer with them and talked to all the chapter leaders. I got a photo of me and the Proud Boys. They actually wrote a saying. They have their sort of like, their quote, and they wrote it on a T-shirt because they heard me talk about them on Rebel Radio, that I thought that they were a group, that they were a slogan without a program. Kind of like what Martin Luther King said about Black Power in his time when he was talking to those leaders. And he was like, listen, they had an uncertainty in following. And it made me think of the Proud Boys, where, they were a group that were just a drinking club, and they were starting to show up to all of these protests and rallies, and they became sort of like, protectors and stuff, and they were being described inaccurately. But I thought it was also due to the fact that they didn't have anything they really stood on, and so they actually gave me a shirt with their quote, and I still have that shirt to this day. And once I found out that actually it was my co-campaign manager was actually a Proud Boy, who's a Jew. And then when I went to go meet the chapter leaders, they were Filipino, they were black, they were white, and I heard that they were all white racists. And I was like, no, but I got labeled being a white supremacist because I went to go have a beer with them.
Yeah, it's amazing how that really will put you to the test. I know, again, perception's everything. And I remember texting with you when I had some really good friends of mine who were devout followers of Christ who had come across something that was written about you. And I think there was an element of truth to it, but it was mischaracterized. I can't even remember what the topic was. I think it was on abortion. I think it was on abortion and like the rare cases that you think it should be, or you thought it should be allowed. And they were like, it was disappointing because I was like, we know God uses even evil for good. Genesis 50 shows us that. So you look at King David, you look at all the flawed men who were righteous before God, and that were his servants. I mean, he calls Nebuchadnezzar, who was a total psychopath, his servant, because he used him to bring justice to his people who kept rebelling every time they get comfortable. And people get so comfortable here. California, we got everything there is to offer. I think that's why a lot of people compromise on the taxes and all the horrible politics, because there's so much to do here. But when there's that moral ambiguity that they're blind to what's really going on, it makes it that much easier. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if you want to address that. I don't know.
I mean, when you so one of those things that I actually had my team members go through, those data aggregator sites that try to pull together questionnaires, and they try to pull together information that, like you said, kind of takes things a little bit out of context, which is why I kind of stopped filling those out, because they're voter guide questionnaires. So they'll get part of it right, but if you don't answer the question altogether, I literally have an email from 2 weeks ago that has been nagging me to fill out a voter questionnaire, and I won't do it. But then it literally said that if you don't, we'll fill it in for you. And I was like, well, how are you going to do that? And I actually had one of my team members, I think it was Jules, who actually looked into that and was like, look, it says here, you're in support of, whatever DEI. And I was like, I've never been in support of DEI. It's even on my website where I don't support that. So there's a lot of these sites that will put together a variation of your information, and then they'll fill in the rest. So it'll skew a topic of something that like a policy that's written down, but maybe I spoke about it in a way where I said, are there exceptions to the rules? Of course there are. But then it gets misconstrued, and then it ends up on one of these voter guide data aggregator sites. And so I was like, yeah, in part I had spoken about this, but I'm against abortions altogether.
Yeah.
So I don't support it. But have there been exceptions to the rules? Of course. What were those exceptions, right? And we had talked about rape, we had talked about incest. But even then I said, when you talk about that, I was of my discussion was we need to put money towards those institutions to help those women who were raped. And there should be an immediate investigation, and the circumstances of them committing suicide because now they've been unfortunately impregnated by the rapist.
Yeah.
What do we do to save 2 lives? That's where the topic came from, but somehow it got misconstrued that I supported abortions.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never written that. I've never put that down. Some of these informations are on these sites, and I was like, well, that's not true. But that's why I called my team and I said, how many of these other sites are out there? Dozens of them.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about them. That's why I tell people if it's not on my website or I'm not on video or recorded radio, it never happened.
Although you got to be careful with that now too.
Right?
With
I know
AI.
with AI.
Honestly, the Running Man, I talk about it all the time. I mean, that's what I started off majorly talking about, movies. I mean, it's spellbinding, it's programming. But the stuff that was revealed in the 70s, I mean, that book was written by Stephen King, The Running Man.
Yeah.
In the 70s, talking about a futuristic world where video would be able to be contrived that falsely depicts somebody doing something. I mean, they've known what's been coming for so long. We've been conditioned, predictive programming, and more than anything, truth in plain sight, just to see like you guys are so dumb, you don't know, even though we're showing you. And you see that, and a lot of people see that. But then some people just do expect perfection when we're talking about, oftentimes people say he's the lesser of 2 evils when they're talking about voting for Trump or anybody.
Yeah.
I guess let's get into that real quick because that's something that some people may find interesting, that you did decide you needed to go no candidate, no party candidate, the no party candidate, which, explain what your reasoning for that was.
Well, it came to me studying. I was looking at the memoirs of our forefathers, right? There's 56 of them, and I've read a little over 10 of some of their memoirs, right? I mean, they wrote a lot, and all of them wrote very extensively. And, I started looking at the party system and how far back the party went, and what caused the party to separate, because initially it was the Democratic Republican Party. Like, when did it become a 2-party system? And then I came across, George Washington's farewell address. I never read it. And when I read it, he literally warns, like in the middle of the address, he really warns against a 2-party system, about ambitious men who would subvert the Constitution for their own, sinister gain. Like, he literally says that right there. I'm partly paraphrasing, but he literally says it right there. And others also, Adams wrote about, that it would be a great evil and a great divide. And yet here we are fighting for the party system. And I thought, why are we doing that? When our forefathers who wrote this beautiful Constitution that's still way ahead of its time, that most people have to this day have never read the whole thing, let alone studied the whole thing. And it just begs the question, at the end of the day, what are we doing, right? It begs the question, why are we fighting for something that even they said, don't do it? And now here we are doing this, and it presents the illusion of choice. So I left the party. And I left the party, too, because almost everybody, I've been all over the state. I tell people I've been to about 247 cities. There's 483, so I haven't gone to all of them, but I spread out over these 7 years. I've been to all 58 counties, a minimum of twice. Some I've been, 3, 4, 5, 6 times where there's, the bulk of, the populace. And so you spend more times in those counties than the rural areas. And every time I've circled back, I've asked the same questions before, these same groups that I've spoken to. How many of you read the California State Constitution? Nobody. And I asked myself, and I'm like, well, how do you know who you're going to put into office when you yourself don't know the laws? You don't know your state constitution, yet you claim that this person is going to be better because, well, they wear a badge or they've been in politics and they've climbed the ladder. Now you have a career politician. Yet somehow that brings you a sense of comfort when you vote for that person, when all you're doing is perpetuating the same ignorance and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I realized it was a group of Breakfast Club goers that, loved to hear great information but never did anything with it. They're not out there really fighting the fight. Very few on both hands. I could count how many out of the entire state that I've been through, how many groups were just Breakfast Club goers. And then when you look at the GOP, they don't even follow their own bylaws. Why have them if you're not even going to adhere to them? Yeah. That goes for the DNC. I've spoken to Democrats. I have, and I just realized I've never wanted to be a part of the party system in the first place, but I thought maybe you had to join one of the two. But really, if you look at California, there's now almost 8 million no party preference registered voters. They are now the second largest body in California. The Republicans are only 5.3. They are the minority now.
That's wild, but it should be very telling for anybody, again, that's paying attention that many people have disenfranchised themselves from a system that they know is corrupt, and yet they just somehow seem to keep taking the bait and the food that they're being fed. And we'll see what happens. But we're talking to Daniel Mercuri here on Truth Radio, truth-radio.com, on crntalk.com. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, we're back here. Final segment of the first hour with Daniel Mercuri, DanielForCalGovernor.com. Thanks for sticking with us. It is at Daniel for Cal Governor on all your social media too, right?
Yeah. Well, which?
Right. It changes, right? Correct that if there's other ones.
Yeah, there's other. I have others that are like at Daniel for
the number 4.
The number 4 Cal or CA Governor. I have a number of them.
But some of them are that. Okay,
yeah.
So they'll find you eventually. They'll only find one of them.
Yeah.
I literally I love it when people say, "Oh, I've never heard of them," and then kind of dismiss it as if it's like, I was like, well, now you have. It's like, it's like people, like they don't believe something unless they see it on TV. It's truly like the biggest hypnosis machine tool of the devil ever.
Yeah, that's what I get. I get a lot of, I've never heard of him. And I just put out that post, the video that I've been out there, for so long, 7-year journey. I couldn't show all the photos and locations. And when I was going through all the videos and, the events that we record and take pictures and stuff, there was no way I could put it all. I mean, it would be like a 30-minute video highlight reel. I just
right.
picked my favorites that I thought, good angle, good movements, videos and stuff. But there were tons. And I had forgotten some of those places that I had been to. And when people tell me, "Oh, I've never heard of him," how come he's not on CNN or ABC? How come he's not in the debates? It tells me that that's an uneducated, inactive voter. It tells me that person is waiting to be told what by the mainstream media who's running for office, and yet those are the same people who say, "Oh, I don't trust the mainstream media anymore," but yet they're waiting for the mainstream media to tell them who to vote for.
Yeah, they've been conditioned that way. Sadly, I mean. The public education system trained them up that way, and yet they it's like you break away one peg at a time. So
well, and so we were talking about earlier was, there's 8 million NPP, right? So in March of 2026 this year, there was 6.9 million, and earlier in the previous year in 2025 around June, there was about 5.7. And then previous year was 5.3. So from March of this year till now, this month, there is now a little over 7.7, almost 8 million. So within a span of 3 months, the number of no party preference registered voters who have unregistered from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have moved over into the NPPs. They're tired. They're disenfranchised. They don't want anything to do with the party system at all because they can see how much of a lie it is, and they can tell that these candidates that the mainstream media is pumping out, they're not happy with. In fact, I can't tell. I actually got a phone call from a particular voter who I literally asked him, "Are you feeling anxiety in having to choose between, say, Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco or Xavier Becerra and Katie Porter?" And his answer was yes. He goes, "I'm so stressed in trying to figure out which of these lesser individuals that I feel like I got to put in office that might do some good." And I thought, how miserable is that people are really feeling an anxiety in picking between the lesser of all these evils, these less than reputable candidates, it's all back to a compromise.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And, you know, I've told many friends, like, I don't even think I would, I don't trust the system at all. I don't even know if I would vote if it wasn't you. And I don't say that to blow smoke or anything, but I truly don't trust the system, but I trust God. And that's why I've always told you, it's like, even if you don't win, you're affecting so many people along the way that his kingdom is getting filled, all the eyes you're opening, regardless of what happens here. I mean, he could be giving us over to the next sociopath like he did in Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar. We just don't know his plan. If people don't repent and turn to him, he's not going to give them a leader that's actually going to bring righteousness to the state. He's going to let them continue in their depravity. And so God's will be done. We can count on that. And we got a whole nother hour to talk with Daniel Mercuri here, Daniel for Cal Governor. Visit the website if you want to hear it from the horse's mouth. Man standing on virtue and will stand up for you in the state of California. You can bank on that. Stick around. We got a lot more to talk about here on Truth Radio on CRNTalk.com.
You want answers.
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
All right. Welcome back to Truth Radio. Top of the second hour. We're here with Daniel Mercuri, Daniel for CalGovernor.com, and getting into his life leading up to here, his childhood, his battles with the corrupt California, just political realm, and, you know, what goes through. You get put through the ringer when you're standing up and opposing the forces that want to hide the truth from the people rather than give them the truth and give them justice. So welcome back, Daniel.
Thank
Hour
you.
two. I hear we're getting some questions from your audience about some of your policies, particularly on the business front.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want to address there as far as?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a general question in the sense of, you know, are we talking about, you know, what are you going to do for businesses and, or, you know, are you going to run the state like a business? You know, what are we going to do about state revenue? I mean, so it's sort of an umbrella question, but, you know, when it comes to small businesses, I've always believed first and foremost that small businesses have always been the backbone of any strong economy, right? When you talk about the mom and pop shops, right? So those are the ones that eventually cause tremendous competition in an open and fair and free market. Well, we don't have that in the state of California. We have an impingement from government that has, you know, a wide overreach and enabling people from actually engaging in prosperity. The state actually doesn't have a right to tax the way it's taxing right now, right? We're being double taxed, tripled, quadrupled, right? It's taxation without representation. And so really a lot of people say, well, the legislative body, you know, controls, you know, the purse for the most part in the executive branch, you know, through certain measures, you know, makes the proposal and then, you know, when dealing with the state revenue, right? But a lot of the taxes from the state, unfortunately, you know, is pulling in excise or borrowing from excise tax. And a lot of people don't know what is excise, right? And excise is really talking about when your business, say it takes $100,000 to maintain overhead. Well, government's not supposed to tax that. It can only tax what you gain from excess, right? So if you make $200,000, well, then that over amount of excess is what they can tax. And they're going beyond that. They also are taxing, you know, your income. But the problem with income, and I've said this before, is that it puts a lot of people don't know that income has actually been defined under two different jurisdictions. And it's already been defined that income is really labor. And the way the IRS defines it is gains. But if you didn't know that, right, you're allowing them under the contract and the exploitation of the contract clause to allow them to take from your employer, right, your money that you make from an employer. Well, that's illegal. So really the governor can prevent state income tax without the state legislature. Now, there's a few other things that other candidates have tried to take from my policy, but they can't explain it the right way. They just think they're going to be able to establish this, especially with, the corrupt Democrats, right? If we're still a super majority, that governor's going to have a hard time if they don't know how to get them in line. And I can already tell you that people like Steve and Chad, Xavier Becerra, Katie Porter, they're not going to do that. They don't know how to do that. In fact, they make the claim. But they're going to turn around and they're going to say, well, I didn't know what I know now, and I just, we're going to try to figure it out. They're going to throw you a few bones. They're going to try to bury it, and then they're going to get back to business as usual. So under my administration, one of the first things is to remove the state income tax and to remove the taxes away from excise in a way where they keep borrowing it that impinges upon competition. They cannot do that, and it's already in the Constitution. That's how simple this is.
I know. It is simple, and when you explain it, it sounds simple and completely complex at the same time. I remember I had to learn multiple new words, or at least how to pronounce them, in your book. There's a bunch of things I want to get into. Going back to the beginning, but going back to some thoughts I was having when I was just listening to you. We'll do that on the other side. We got a long segment coming up. You're listening to Truth Radio on crntalk.com. We're with Daniel Mercuri, and the website is danielforcalgovernor.com, and we will be right back. All right. Welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com, at Truth Radio 33 with at Daniel for Cal Governor. He's got some others, but you can find them all through there or on his website. Daniel, as we're sitting here talking, I'm just remembering some things we've talked about over the years. And I know you mentioned it. I remember when I was going to move out here, I was waiting tables at the Olive Garden, and I told a guy I was going to move to L.A. I wanted to make movies. He's like, oh, man, California, L.A., man, you got to have balls of brass and nerves of steel. And it's like, you really do. You got to have thick skin, like you mentioned. And the more you go through the ringer, the thicker your skin has to get, or you will wilt, or you'll run and you'll stop doing it, or you'll give in, you'll compromise, and then you'll pat yourself on the back thinking you did something, which a lot of people do. I mean, there's a reason that Jesus is one of a kind. He turned down the deal that so many in this world have accepted from the God of this world. And it's like, that's that spiritual reality that people aren't willing to accept yet. But one thing, even so many of my dear friends, I know they can be very sensitive to people that come across brash. Like your slogan, I'm here to offend you. And I remember thinking, are you sure you want to do it? Like, it's like, because people like Christians, they want somebody that's just going to be so graceful and patient. They want the perfect, they want Jesus to run for office. Yeah. But that's not happening. He uses flawed individuals. We're all flawed. Yeah. We all have pieces that aren't going to line up with somebody's idealized version of a Christian today. So it's like, I know you came up with that, and I understand why you came up with it. And I'm sure it still might rub some people the wrong way. I think people that have given you a chance have realized, okay, you've got to have that kind of nerve, that kind of, cahoots to be in this arena. Yeah. Have you only gotten further hardened? Have you softened at all when it comes to that? What would you tell the Christian that is like, man, I don't know, some of the things he says is a little harsh? Like,
I would say I've probably gotten more hard because I'm much more blatant and direct about it. I don't mince words anymore. And honestly, that's why I came up with I have so many different slogans now where I said, freedom involves the hard truths, which is, stemming from, I'm here to offend you, not because I want to insult you, but because the truth offends. And I realized that's a part of, my own, belief in Jesus and faith in the Bible and, God's word. And I know a lot of people hate that because I've been attacked too, where people say, stop talking about Jesus. And I'm like, no. Because I'm holding myself to a higher standard, and that's what we want from all of our representatives as well. And I'm very direct about it. And I know right away, like I've been in conversations with lawyers. Lawyers can't stand when I speak, in their judicial, legalistic, legislative jargon. They don't want people to know this stuff. And when I talk to other people who just try to attack me, I know it comes from a level of ignorance because people don't want to know that they have been fooled, right? What's that old saying? Mm-hmm. It's easier to fool somebody than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. Mm-hmm. And this is something that people have a very, very difficult time understanding. So when we start talking about policies, and I bring up the Constitution, and I bring up state codes, and I bring up case law, who am I to do that? Who am I? I don't have a degree in those kinds of areas of industry. Why am I the expert, and why should they listen? It tells me, again, people want to make claim that they're the expert, yet they have no background in it themselves, but yet they're the ones who are saying that, you're not fit for the position when they themselves don't know any better, right? Like, how do you know what to ask when you don't know what to ask?
Right.
It blows my mind. So I've become more direct and more harsh about it. Not, again, because I'm trying to insult you. I'm trying to wake you up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wake Californians up. I've done this on my dime, and I've lost my job. When people, that was a question at the last town hall I was at the Family Court CPS town hall, where the question was asked, would you fight against, the corrupt California bar or the ABA, right, the American Bar Association, for the way they operate the courts, and would you be willing to lose your job if you were governor and somehow that happened? And I said, I've already lost my job for this day, and I've been out of a job for months. Now, I have money still. My wife is still working. I get I'm a veteran, so I have a veteran pension and stuff. So I'm not broke. It's just, I'm not living exactly as comfortable as I did, and money has been tight because of the fact that I'm still putting a lot of that into this campaign. So I've already sacrificed my finances to the point where I could have put down money on 2 new homes. And I didn't. I put it towards campaigning for the people of my state, because there are a lot of wonderful people. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that are less than reputable and quite personally probably, don't even deserve to be Americans the way they hate their own country. But I'm fighting for everybody, whether you want it or not, because in the end, I can tell whether you hate me or whether you agree with me and you support me, we're all on a page where we know we are tired of just being enslaved to this corrupt system.
Yeah. Yeah, I know one of the scriptures I repeat most often is Matthew 24:12, and it's the love of many will grow cold as lawlessness increases. So I know that the more you deal with the people who are really just ignorant, it's easy to become harder. I know when you say harder, you just mean you're putting up, and like you said, you got to be more direct. I think I've gotten more like that, but not nearly on your level, because I haven't been confronted so often where you literally have to, and it's sink or swim. But what do you say to the people that want to see more grace or patience with the people? Not that you haven't. I'm sure you have. I mean, I've seen you interact with people that are disagreeable, even on the stage. But you brought up that one incident where you lost your cool. Yeah. And I know I've lost my cool before, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like, sorry, God. And then I have to apologize to the other person too, even though I felt righteous in what I was saying, but it was not the right way to handle it.
I mean, I've gone up to people and I've formally apologized, and I've admitted that maybe I could have handled the situation better. There was a couple weeks ago, I was coming back from the town hall, and I kind of lost my cool a little bit with somebody that was, on X-Base that was kind of pushing my buttons, and I kind of brought it around and stuff. But again, it's one of those things where I can admit when I've been a little too harsh. I can admit when I've dropped the hammer down a little, a little too direct. And I get it. Not every personality is going to want it. That's why I tell people, you don't have to like me, to vote for me. You just have to know that what I stand on is what this state really needs. And I think that's how I've won some people over, and others, unfortunately, they want to hear what their itching ears want to hear. Mm-hmm. They want to know that you're willing to negotiate with the swine degenerates that put us in this mess in the first place, because they're afraid of retribution of some kind, right? They're afraid of, some sort of consequence, that if you're that aggressive, it's only going to make things worse, right? So it's like that whole saying, give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk. And this is sort of
I haven't heard that one.
Right? It's one of those, this is the compromise. People are like, well, how are you going to work with the left? What are you going to do? And I've explained it many times, but there's not going to be a working with the left. There's going to be accountability with the left. And I've had a lot of people say that Daniel just wants to take down the system. No, I don't want to take down the system. I want to take down the corrupt individuals who have really, flipped our government institutions upside down. They shouldn't be in the positions that they're in. Somebody and nobody is holding them accountable. It's taken me 7 years to figure out how to do it legally and lawfully, constitutionally. And when I start talking about it, people get afraid, because then they realize the information I'm providing is valid. And now they have a sort of a dread or a trepidation that they fear this could actually happen. If this guy gets into office, he could actually enact these things, and will it make it worse?
Well, let's go there, because we've mentioned the death threats. We've talked about that stuff before. You literally have had threats on your life. You never know if they're coming from high up. You've had vans outside your home. Yeah. You're well secured there, but you still don't know. You've had some scary things happen, and because of the threats, they're like elevated where, something that's not as threatening feels that way because of the threats that are coming in.
Yeah.
I look at it as, let's say a miracle happens and God wants you in office and you really do start to do these things. You become target number one because you are truly against the system. They're either going to try to buy you in and really, really line your pockets even more, or you're going to be somebody that has to be taken out. I mean, the JFK files, I think they're talking about releasing them. I mean, I've been hearing that there's going to be military tribunals for the people on the Epstein list and these people that are implicated and have really proven to be bad seeds for like 6+ months, but nothing's happening. So it's like clearly there's a higher echelon of power that is keeping this stuff suppressed. So maybe God's protecting you, by if you don't get in the office, because he wants you around so you can keep being a mouthpiece for the people. But I know you said you're not going to be that mouthpiece anymore. I don't know. That's a lot to take in, but what do you think about that? Do you really want this task?
I do.
What's going to come with it?
I have, and then my wife and I and my children, we've all prayed together, and we said that if this is the path that God wants, because again, this race is a race that is a dogfight. This is a race that is completely uncertain, because we know that the numbers don't lie. We know that the no party preference registered voters have exceeded past the Republicans. Yet the mainstream media pumps out that the two leading Republican candidates are Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco, and they're trying to push, Xavier Becerra, who's just as, if not more corrupt than Eric Swalwell. And when we talk about that, we realize, we're not choosing from the creme de la creme. And so somebody like me who gets into office understands how we're going to actually end all the corruption, right? I aim to do what? Clean house. I aim to clean house. You can't get moving until you clean house first. Well, how do you do that, right? And there's a huge stepping process to that. But I think militarily as well. Why? Because I was in the military. I was I operated, and I was always in and out of theater. So, I served in war zones. Again, this is one of those things where I think outside the box because that was part of my job. And then now I'm doing it, legislatively, and I'm looking in all vested branches. I'm looking at vested authorities and what each power, resides within each branch, and how one can sort of mitigate the other, and what you can do under certain circumstances. Again, this is not one of those things you can, talk about in just a few minutes. It's one of those things that people say, you got to write a book about this. It's one of those kind of things. So do I want to go down, the threats and stuff? No, but it comes with the territory. It's already been coming with the territory. And you can't live in fear. And my wife and I and my family and extended family, we've all come up with certain plans, because a lot of people who say, I've never heard of you, yet I get a half a dozen emails weekly that ask me to bow out of the race and support another candidate. If I wasn't that threatening, right? If I was such a peon of a candidate, why do you even bother emailing me? That's because some people do the research and have actually found I nearly got almost 100,000 votes in 2022. But you have to go county by county and then mirror it with what the SOS actually has, because remember, they only stop counting once the day is over with, but they don't tell you that in California they keep counting, all of them until till I think it's like 30 to 60 days afterwards. That's the real number. And so people have asked me, and they said, that's a number that, you could give over to, Xavier Becerra. No, I'm not a Democrat, and I don't want a Democrat getting in office. Well, what about Chad? We got to get a Republican in. I don't want a Republican in, and I don't support either one of them, right? And they're like, but we got to win the state. I don't want to win the state with either of those party choices. Right. And so, I'm game and have been for 7 years fighting for this seat. If I don't win, for me, politics is going to go on hold. I need to get back to my family. But this is where prayer comes into play. And this is where I am praying heavily that this is where God wants me to go. And if it's not, at the end of the day, it's always His will. It's never mine.
Yeah. More of Him, less of us. While we're there, it's like gossip is such a thing. I don't think when you're in the political realm you can really consider it that. But I think people are probably curious, knowing that you are coming from, a biblical background where you want to uphold God's law and bring justice to the corrupt that has been covered up for so long. So if people are thinking, why not Bianco? Why not Steve Hilton? I know you've shared some things with me, but what would you want to share, if you can share, your biggest red flags on why you wouldn't support them if you thought, there wasn't a shot? Actually, we're coming up on a break right now, so we'll save that for the other side of this break. And now's a good time to, you want to tell people your social media, your other ones where people can find you?
You can go on Xbase. I think my handle is at Daniel for the number 4 Cal CAL Gov 26, and I think it's the same for IG. So if they want to find me, my handle's on Instagram or on X. Those are two of the same handles. I labeled them the same.
Right on. And then Daniel4CalGovernor.com and at Daniel4CalGovernor. You're listening to Truth Radio. It's a special election edition with Daniel Mercuri. Definitely worthy of a vote if you want to have any shot of getting justice in California. He's your guy. Maybe that's not correct for me to plug, but, it's the truth. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. It's 2 hours flying by. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com, here with Daniel Mercuri, Daniel4CalGovernor. We've been going all over the place, trying to hit things that are important before the break, and this is a short break, but I feel like we should get into it. What is your red flags against the popular candidates? I mean, I can't turn on the TV now without seeing Bianco. Haven't seen many Hiltons, but I know they're there.
Yeah.
And then Becerra, too, I've been seeing.
Yeah.
Like, what is something that people need to know that want the lesser of two evils if they haven't heard of you yet?
The lesser of two, when you look at it, a lot of people don't know I was going to go to Bianco. Back during when my daughter was undergoing chemo, it was very difficult to continue to campaign in the off season. And I had gathered enough information on how would I put these people in prison? How could I do it? How could I do it legally and lawfully? And when I found all the evidence that I dug up, and I dug up quite a bit, and I only talk about 1% of that and a little bit I put in my book. I took that around to all these attorneys in the state of California and some retired judges, and not one of them said I was wrong. They all said that I was looking to take down the government. They're not going to let you. That was like the biggest phrase. And they all said it in various ways to me. And I was like, that's not what I asked. I asked do I have evidence that could actually, drop the hammer so that I could take these people down? And they all kind of, shrugged and saying, yes, it's just they're not going to fight. And I'm like, who are they? You're talking about corrupt body of people that are going to do everything they can to keep this system up. And so for me, I was going to go to Chad, but unfortunately, I started looking into Chad. Like I do anything else, I do my research and I dig as hard as I can to look for inconsistencies. Because if I'm going to vote for you, everybody forgets I'm a voter too. So if I'm going to vote for you, I want to make sure that you're a person of character. The nature of who you are is steady, right? You're not somebody who wavers back and forth, and you're consistent in who you are and what you say. And he is not. And, and of course it always came down to, first and foremost, it always came down to the knee. And a lot of people are like, well, he's praying. And I said, no, that's not true. Because when you look at the evidence from start to finish, there was no praying that ever happened. But let's just look at the fact that I say, okay, let's just look at what he did. Well, if I look at my state codes, it's section 3206. That says that if you're a police officer or any state agency and while in uniform, you may not participate in any political activity while in that uniform. So he just violated that state code that put him in violation. Why would I want that? So you, at the highest authority of your county, just violated something that you should know better. And according to their policies, they're not supposed to do that too within the county district anyway. So despite that it's a state code, it's also an agency code within the county of him being the sheriff. So he just threw it out the door. I mean, so that's just that part. But then when people say, oh, well, he saved my town from BLM burning it down. No, he didn't. He surrendered your town. When he took that knee, he took a knee for a Marxist group which violates the California state constitution that deals in communism in the second paragraph, which is known as the offending paragraph of the oath of office to California. So they are a Marxist group. BLM on the website says we are a Marxist group. Well, if you read anything about Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, who wrote the Communist Manifesto and the Pillars of Abolition, they are the antithesis to the Constitution. Not to mention, they don't believe in God. So he was duped into praying because he tells everybody, I'll never deny anybody from praying. But there was no praying. He said, and he told everybody that he was working with BLM. And then in the CRA video that I have on my own website that I have in one of my videos, he literally tells the CRA, the person who asked them to pray suddenly took off running the minute that they kneeled down. So now we're to believe that you were duped into praying, and the person who asked you took off running, but you continued to pray even though there was no video from start to finish from that happening. So either he's showing his ineptitude that BLM is a Marxist group that doesn't believe in God, or he's lying and he has to say that he was praying because if he's ever investigated by the DOJ, then he can take under the First Amendment that he was praying because it will provide reasonable doubt. See, if you know anything about the courts, and he does, then he knows how to present that reasonable doubt. So he has to take lying to his grave. So either way, he's either lying to you directly, he's showing his ineptitude, and he willfully violated California state code. And that's just for starters.
Yeah. Reasonable doubt, plausible deniability. They become great orchestrators of how to wiggle that truth and blur the lines. We see it everywhere. We see it everywhere. And it's I was going to ask you too about the debate that they literally were breaking the law, but they're like, if you got to sue, you got to sue. Do what you got to do. We'll get to that on the other side of this break because there really is so much corruption. We could do a 4-hour show and then still only get a quarter of the way through. We're sitting down with Daniel Mercuri on Truth Radio on crntalk.com. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com. We're already in our last long segment, and we're here with Daniel Mercuri, danielforcalgovernor.com. Truly, I say this in jest, our only hope, but obviously Jesus is our only hope, but if you're going to put your faith in man to stand for Jesus, to stand in his place, you're looking at the only viable candidate here in California. And I say that because of working with him, knowing him, and just, none of us are perfect. I know I'm not. I wouldn't want to have all my skeletons dug out if I was on the stage that you are and just getting dragged through it. Not many people would, and it does take thick skin. So appreciate you for all that, man. Just Godspeed on the final edge of the race. The Apostle Paul tells us to finish the race.
Yes, that was one of the primary things why I continued on with this race was God telling me in prayer, just in dreams, to finish the race. And I look back and I look at my wife and I said, wow, 7 years, here we are. We're at the finish line. June 2nd, people are that's the final day to send in your vote or go in and put down your, pen to paper. And here we are. And I just, I couldn't have done it first and foremost without the Holy Spirit, without God, fueling me, even though I'm running on fumes and, being dragged through the mud. Everybody has tried to dig up dirt on me and they've never found it. So, they would try to put together something that was very inconsistent about who I am. And then they engage in vulgarities or character assassination, right? And they ostracized me, and I got it from everywhere, right? And I actually get attacked more from the Republican Party than I do the Democrats. And for me, it's very surprising. And I get more visceral from the Republican Party, the GOP, and the CRA than I do from the left. Even though the left is blatant as they are, it's funny is, being in the military, I respected my enemy, right? When I was overseas in the Middle East, I respected, terrorists and the jihadists because they didn't have qualms about saying they wanted to cut my head off and parade our body around and kill the infidel, right? I knew where they stood, so I can respect my enemy because they're not pretending to be my friend. Whereas the person who is, friend to your face telling you, oh, you got my vote, and then I would catch those same people bad-mouthing me on social media.
Wow.
And saying horrible things or things that were just completely untrue and completely fabricated. And I'm like, wait, I thought you were my friend, right? And some people would get mad at me and they'd be like, oh, I've promoted you and I've talked to people about you. But then I catch you telling everybody, but don't vote for Daniel. He's just not going to win. He doesn't have the votes.
Right.
And when I catch you in it, you attack me. Like, I can't tell you how many times that's happened. I've had people literally text my personal cell and be like, I thought we were friends. And I'm like, I don't know what kind of friend, what your definition of a friend is, but a friend doesn't go out there, promote me, and then tell everyone not to vote for me. That's not a friend, right?
Honestly, I've had friends, I've had brothers in Christ say, but does he have a chance? We need to vote for somebody that's going to win. And
Yeah.
I'm like, do you trust that person? You really want to get somebody in there just that's going to be of your political affiliation?
Right.
How's that work really for the country right now? I mean, a lot of people got what they wanted, and everything's still in chaos because the God of this world is the orchestrator of chaos, and he thrives in chaos and confusion.
Yeah.
That's why it's too, like, you drop in the Republican Party. I'm still a Republican just because I don't even care. I'm just too lazy to change it because I really don't care. I'll still vote for you as an independent. Literally, the last election, I voted for Jesus. I wrote in my own candidate. I was like, I'll go up there. I'm not going to wear a sticker that says I voted, but people want to ask me, you voted? Yeah, I voted.
Yeah.
And then I look forward to asking. You want to ask me who? And like, I'll tell them. Then that can start the only conversation that really matters.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is everybody says, well, you have to unregister and re-register if you want to vote for a no party preference. No, you don't. Not in a statewide race in California. It's a jungle primary. That means you see everyone's name on the ballot. You vote for whoever you want. That's how that works. And people are like, oh, I can vote for you? I don't have to unregister. That's been a tactic of people in the Republican Party fighting against me. But that's the crazy thing too, is they're the ones who are doing all the attacking. And there are a lot of silent voters. And I've spoken to groups of Democrats. I've been in rooms of Democrats. And they are more likely to vote for an NPP than they are a Republican, including a Republican who's been endorsed by Trump, who they loathe.
Yeah.
So now it paints a different picture.
Yeah.
So they're either going to go the way of Xavier Becerra, who's also horrendously corrupt, more than Eric Swalwell. Yet again, people are like, I got to choose one of these guys because that's who the mainstream media prompted up. The no party preference is who they don't want you to know about, which is why California's SOS is trying to figure out how they're going to do this, because when it comes to a federal election, well, now you have to Democrats are the only ones who play a smart game, and they allow for their primary to be open, so swing voters are the no party preference, whereas the Republicans say, oh no, you don't get to know who our candidates are. You're going to have to join our party if you want to vote for them. And the Democrats are like, no, we'll send you out a ballot for you. Here you go. Please vote for our candidate. That's a smart play.
Yeah.
And people wonder why they're winning, right? But now we have a mindset where the state says we're going to have to turn the no party preference independent voters into their own party. How are you going to do that? Because they don't have protocols where they need those votes in California. Well, now 8 million of the 22 million registered voters in California, even though there's 40 million, only 22 are registered. 8 million can flip everything on their head, especially in a federal election. How are you going to handle those guys? Because they don't care about either party.
Yeah.
That's going to throw everything out.
Well, let me ask you this then, because we're going to run out of time fast, but something that just happened that I don't think a lot of people are like, I haven't seen him, like, where is he in the debates? But it's literally unlawful for them to deny you the same amount of airtime during a public debate.
Yep.
I'm not sure if I'm wording it correctly,
no, you're right.
but then they literally said, no, sorry, we don't have, we're not going to allow you that. Explain that to people.
Yeah, so the mainstream media tries to tie their, quote unquote, chosen candidates based off of the, independent Emerson College criteria. The problem with that criteria is it's skewed. The Emerson College picks who they want. They don't go and look at all 106 candidates that were declared to run for governor. They went and looked at their own personal criteria of who they wanted that already had ties to the unions, already had millions of dollars coming in, because that's where that money comes from. It's not from independent grassroots. And $1 million donor or millionaires don't just sit there and give you $1 million. They can't do it because the state prevents that. So they create little small agencies, and they create little small front companies and, these nonprofit organizations so that you can get that kind of money that looks like grassroots. That's how that's done. Yeah. So the criteria, then the FEC says that they have to provide equal airtime. However, so if they use one criteria of 8 candidates, and I come into to NBC and I say, okay, well, under the FEC, you have to provide us whatever it costs, the same amount to my campaign and to organizations so that they can do an independent debate aired the same way. They have to say yes, especially within the 15-day time frame, which it has been. They literally said no. They weren't going to let it, even if we met their criteria to the Emerson College with a couple of other candidates have met the criteria. They X'd them out anyway because they weren't part of the establishment choices. So they literally said, you're going to just have to go down the legal route. So they knew there was a violation. And they know that if they go the legal route, it's the judicial system is just going to kick the can down the road until the election's over with. It's not going to put an injunction up on the election.
Right.
So candidates like me, who they know are going to sway the votes and bury the other candidates, because I've already been on stage with Steve and Chad and a couple of other candidates. They don't hold water. They can't. They don't know the Constitution. It's so easy for me to tear apart, Bianco's, conversations, and I already have on stage. Same with Steve. I've been right there with him, and people are like, clearly Daniel knows what he's talking about. Those guys are giving you lip service and giving you platitudes. It's so easy to see. So the mainstream media doesn't want that, so they purposely block out the other candidates. And people go, well, they must not be trying as hard. That's the illusion.
Yeah.
That's why people are like, how come I don't see Daniel? I have over 80 interviews and I've been on some of those 80 interviews with similar podcasters. But the problem is that 80 interviews, right, is as far as I can probably go. And I traveled to all 58 counties in 247 cities.
Wow.
I don't know what more I can do. All I know is you're not an active voter. You're waiting to be told who to vote for. And if you don't see them, then you are fear-mongered into worrying that you're going to lose this race when all you're really doing is choosing somebody that's going to give you a few bones. And you're going to wonder why nothing changed. Mm-hmm. That's how it's going to work. So you don't want to vote for me? Don't vote for me. I'm not going to pander. I'm going to stand where I stand. But a lot of people are like, maybe you can be on their team.
Yeah.
What makes you think I want to be on their team? If that was the case, I wouldn't be running.
Right. I know. It's so much hypocrisy and just blind ignorance and devotion to a system that, like you said, they know is corrupt on some level, and yet they still want to trust the commercials they see in the Republican candidates. Sadly, a lot of it goes back to the church because, I hear pastors all the time endorsing these same candidates. You got to vote for these candidates. And they're not going with people that aren't heard of. They're going with the candidates that the mainstream is pushing too. So it's like they're just as blind and it's sad. But again, it's a spiritual battle. I got some scripture here, but I do want to ask you, as we're running out of time, if you don't win, we've talked about this, but what's the plan for Daniel in that case?
Honestly, the plan for me is get back to my family and put all my energy and effort into, my relationship and strengthening my relationship with my wife and my beautiful children. They have endured this too, and there's been a level of, tumultuous activities and turmoil that they've undergone because Dad can't always be there. Dad's always on a live. Dad's in an interview. Again, I couldn't show you all the interviews. A lot of them have been even in my own home where I'm on camera and we're stream living it and I don't have to go anywhere, but I'll be in there for 3-4 hours an interview. Or I'm going somewhere to the studio to be interviewed. Yeah. And then I have to be on the road for a long drive. So I don't get home sometimes until, 1 o'clock in the morning, or the last one we were up in Stockton, I was gone for 3 days. And my family, my children, this has been going on for 7 years.
Yeah.
So I'm getting back to my family.
And praise God for that. And you know, I don't want to overshare, but I know there was issues, and your son had a real hard time with you being gone all the time, and you dealt with that. And I know you had a family meeting on whether you should continue, and you had the prayer about it. And you decided you were going to do it. But that's one of the things I can't imagine, being away from your family that much. That's what people don't appreciate, like the amount of sacrifice that's going in. And it's truly a selfless endeavor. It's not some vanity project. It's not some, oh, look at me, I want to be in a position of power. You truly want to give the power back to the people. And yet people are so sensitive and just bewildered by the mainstream that they don't see it. So what would be your last pitch message if you find somebody on an elevator, they come up with all this stuff that they've been hoodwinked with? What's your elevator pitch to somebody?
My elevator pitch always comes down to, vote your conscience, vote vertically, and always, when it comes to voting, look at the nature of the character of the candidate, look for any major red flags, and make sure that the candidate you're voting for has a constitutional prowess unlike any other candidate. But that would require you to also have a prowess that you've never had before either, so you know whether or not you're being lied to or having the wool pulled over your eyes. And you're going to see exactly the candidate you should be voting for, not the candidate that everyone's telling you to vote for.
Amen. I mean, we started it with have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Isaiah 5:20 and 21, where woe to those who substitute good for evil, evil for good, bitter for sweet, sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes. And there's so many people who are so wise in their own eyes, they don't have the humility capable to, like you said, accept the fact that maybe they've been lied to an extent that they can't admit in order to change direction.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on our final minute here. What are in this next to last segment, what are your parting thoughts? I don't know if we have any questions that we wanted to get to.
I think for me, my parting thoughts are, a lot of people have said, are you going to continue to put out these educational videos? They're really great. People could really use them. And those take time. They take energy, and they take a lot of effort. And my answer was no. I'll do it for the people who are closest to me in my inner circle. For me, it has to stop somewhere. And where do I have to draw the line? I draw the line there. My family's going to come first at the end of the day.
I think I might have a follow-up on that when we come back from this break. We got one more short segment with Daniel Mercuri, running for California governor. The election is coming up fast. I'm losing track of days. I can't imagine. I honestly don't know how you're doing it, man. So I can just imagine the finish line, that you see it and you can't wait, win or lose. Yeah. It's like the race is almost over. So stick around, come back. We got one more short segment with Daniel Mercuri on Truth Radio. You're listening to crntalk.com. Welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com. We're on the final segment here on the home stretch with Daniel Mercuri. And we went into the break talking about, what you will do if you don't win. And for most people, they probably think that's a given. I think miracles are possible. I think it would take a major miracle in California with all the corruption. But, even in the break, we just got a question about data mining centers. And you were talking about how it does take a lot of time to do videos and present the information that you have, and done such a great job at it. And it just got me thinking, you got so many people who make a living as influencers. Yeah. And it's, why wouldn't you want to parlay that influence and then just keep doing it online? And maybe it does turn into a financial, way to support the family. Yeah. And then you still keep getting the truth out there. You could answer questions that come in like this, and then God can still use you to reveal truth to people that are ready to receive it, but not in the same, you don't have the target on you.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm not going to say that that's not the case, but I think because I'm so tired and so burnt and have been attacked for so long, it's that burden that I need time away from. I
So you're like Aaron Rodgers. You need 8 months and then.
I need time, and where God guides me is where His hand goes, is where I'm going to go. And that's why I say right now I don't feel a pull into going into that continued industry or area of explanation and trying to empower people. Not because I don't want to. It's just because I'm depleted.
Yeah.
And my family's depleted. And I think God, need time with, spending time with God more intimately to recoup my family first. And where it goes from there, we'll see. That's all I can really, really honestly say.
Yeah.
When it comes to the data mining centers, all the data mining centers really shouldn't be even implemented because, we talk about going green, yet these data mining centers are massive and they destroy the land. So how are we going green there, right? They completely obliterate CEQA. And then on top of that, they require a massive amount of power that requires water, to some of these things to generate, certain cooling methods as well as generating energy. And they also pull in energy that other areas require. So it pulls from, some of the rural areas, and it's going to put a lot of people out of, homes. It's going to put people out of businesses and stuff. People are going to have to move. They have no business doing there. But this is what corrupt government does, is allows for these major conglomerates to come in, buy up land in areas where they know they're suffering. And so corrupt government comes in and bankrupts that area. And what does it happen? It forces people to move. It forces people to sell their property purposely. Again, it's all a theater. It's all staged. And as a governor can easily prevent all of that, predominantly because of the fact that it's taking from natural resources. And it's already in the state constitution that natural resources have to be used for the good of the state. How simple.
Yeah. God did make it simple. Man and woman. And look what He's done. Look what we're seeing happen to that. Two sexes, biological.
Right.
They come together and they multiply, and life is created. But we're living in a world that is multiplying death, unfortunately, and it's of the spiritual variety. So I think you played a good role in waking up a lot of people to the truth. And a lot of times people need to be faced with the evil and the corruption that's in this world to have them turn to the ultimate source of good. That's kind of what happened to me. I went down the rabbit hole and realized Jesus is real. And you get in His word and it comes alive, and praise God for that. Because the mind of the flesh is hostile to God, as Romans 8:7 says. If you do not submit to God's law, nothing is possible. But do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what is good, pleasing, and perfect, the perfect will of God. Romans 12:2. Daniel, thank you, brother. Good luck in this election, man. And I think I speak for everybody when I say I hope you do have a presence. Take the time, the rest, the season with your family, and then recharge and come back. Be that voice of truth that people need, and then you can still weed out the candidates going forward. But God bless you, brother.
Appreciate you.
All right, guys. Thanks for sticking around for this special episode of Truth Radio with Daniel Mercuri. Make sure you vote for him on Election Day. God bless.